What could make a man turn against the people he loved most? What secret could drive a husband to pick up a gun and destroy everything he built? In Montgomery, Alabama, Harold Carter thought he had the perfect family until the day he learned his wife's affair wasn't just betrayal, it was blood. Her own son had fathered their 2-year-old boy. And when that truth came out, the night ended in murder. Welcome to True Crime's Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. It was a calm Thursday morning in Montgomery, Alabama, the kind of morning that smelled faintly of dew and red clay, where sunlight settled softly on porches and the low hum of cicadas made the whole neighborhood feel half asleep. Inside a quiet brick house on Willow Bend Drive, Harold Carter stood at the kitchen counter, stirring his coffee the same way he did every morning. 2 spoons of sugar, 1 of powdered creamer, slow circles until the swirl of white disappeared into the brown. He liked his mornings peaceful, predictable. That was how life made sense to him. Harold was 47, tall, broad across the shoulders from decades of lifting lumber and steel. He had the build of a man used to work, not gyms. His hands were rough, his palms permanently stained with callus and grit, but his eyes, deep brown and steady, carried a softness that only showed when he was at home. He'd been with Montgomery development contractors for nearly 25 years, working his way up from hauling boards to leading full crews. Men respected him. He wasn't loud, didn't curse much, didn't throw his weight around. When he spoke, people listened because he didn't waste words. Harold took quiet pride in being that kind of man. He glanced at the picture frame on the kitchen counter like he did every morning before leaving for work. The photo had been taken during a family barbecue 2 summers ago. Vanessa in a floral dress holding their baby boy, Noah, on her hip. Darius standing behind them, tall and proud, and Harold beside them with his arm draped around Vanessa's waist. They all looked happy, the kind of photo folks used as Christmas cards. Harold had that picture printed twice, 1 copy on the counter, the other on his work desk. It reminded him of what all his long days were for. Vanessa Carter was 39, a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Everyone at work called her Nessa. She was the kind of woman whose kindness came naturally. She could calm a crying child, ease a worried patient, and somehow still have the energy to smile after a 13-hour shift. She had almond brown skin, full lips, and a soft, weary beauty that only deepened with age. Vanessa had been through things before Harold: heartbreak, betrayal, raising a son alone. But with him, she thought she'd finally found peace. Their marriage wasn't flashy, but it was steady, respectful. Harold loved her consistency, her loyalty, the way she cared for everyone. What he didn't see was the quiet ache she carried, the loneliness that came from living in the spaces between shifts and routine. Vanessa's nights were long and silent. She'd come home at dawn to find Harold already gone. Coffee mug in the sink, a folded note on the counter. "Have a good day, baby." She'd smile, but sometimes, when she crawled into bed, she'd touch the empty space beside her and feel that word, lonely, pressed down like weight on her chest. Then came Darius, Vanessa's son from her first marriage, 23 years old, fresh out of trade school. He'd been away 2 years studying electrical installation in Birmingham and had come back home to save money while finding a steady job. Darius was tall and lean, with deep brown skin and an edge in his posture that came from being tested by life early. His eyes, though sharp and confident, carried a quiet hunger to prove himself, to belong, to be seen as more than Vanessa's boy. Growing up, he and Harold had a distant relationship. Not bad, just formal. Harold had come into his life when Darius was 10, too old to call another man dad, too young to understand the layers of pride and confusion that made him hesitate to try. But over the years, they built something like mutual respect. Harold saw him as a decent young man. Darius saw Harold as solid, reliable, but rigid, too rigid. When Darius moved back in, it was supposed to be temporary. Harold made space for him, even cleaned out the guest room himself. "Your family," he told him. "Stay as long as you need to get on your feet." Vanessa had smiled with gratitude that night, thinking she was lucky to have a husband like Harold, patient, understanding, selfless. That first week back, the house came alive again. Vanessa cooked more. Darius helped her with chores. He'd sit at the counter while she made dinner, cracking jokes about her music or asking for her advice about jobs. Harold usually came home late, tired and dusty from the construction site. He'd eat, shower, and fall asleep on the couch watching the evening news. Sometimes Vanessa would wake him, sometimes she wouldn't. One night, near midnight, Vanessa walked downstairs for a glass of water and found Darius in the kitchen, earbuds in, scrolling his phone. "You're up late," she said softly. He took one earbud out, smiling. "Can't sleep. My head's still full of wiring diagrams." She laughed quietly. "Well, I guess that's better than what's in mine. Patients yelling, monitors beeping." He nodded, and for a moment, there was just the hum of the refrigerator between them. They talked a little, about the hospital, about his classes, about nothing in particular. She felt comfortable with him. It was innocent, she told herself. Just mother and son catching up. But the way his eyes lingered on her as she talked, attentive, appreciative, warm, made her pulse shift. She didn't like that feeling, but she didn't move away either. Harold noticed the difference slowly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't just that Vanessa and Darius talked more. It was how. Their laughter in the kitchen had a softness to it, something private. He'd come home and find them watching TV, sitting just close enough that he noticed. He told himself he was imagining things. Vanessa was a good woman, and Darius was her child. Still, unease crept in. He pushed it down the same way he pushed through back pain, by pretending it wasn't there. That fall, the company gave Harold a special assignment, managing a site 2 towns over. The hours got longer. He was gone before sunrise and home after dark. Vanessa said she understood. She worked nights, after all. But what she didn't say, what she couldn't, was that the longer Harold was away, the more she found herself leaning toward the one person who noticed she was lonely. The affair didn't start with a kiss. It started with silence. Nights when Darius would wait up for her to come home. Nights when she'd talk and he'd listen like her words mattered. Then came a touch, brief, accidental, skin against skin that lingered too long. One night, it happened. And afterward, they sat there in the stillness, both breathing heavy, both ashamed, both knowing they had crossed something they could never undo. Vanessa cried quietly in the shower, whispering to herself, "It can't happen again." But guilt is a weak barrier when loneliness has already made its home inside someone. The secret between them grew like a shadow, silent, constant, impossible to escape. When Vanessa realized she was pregnant months later, her heart stopped. Harold was ecstatic, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. "See, God's blessing us," he said, eyes shining. "You and me, we still got more love to give." Vanessa smiled through tears, her hands trembling as she held him. Darius said nothing. He moved through the house like a ghost, quiet, watchful, carrying a secret that aged him 10 years in one season. When Noah was born, the whole family celebrated. Harold cried when he held him, whispering, "My boy." He'd never had a son before. He looked down at the tiny face and saw what he thought was his reflection: brown skin, soft curls, his dimple. Vanessa saw all of that too, and told herself she could live with it. Maybe the timing worked out. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe love could forgive what the truth could not. 2 years passed. Harold poured everything into his work and his home. Every nail he hammered, every wall he built was for them. He'd come home covered in dust, scoop up Noah, and let the little boy climb all over him while Vanessa cooked. They'd sit at the table like a perfect family. On weekends, Harold would grill out back while Darius played with Noah. Sometimes, watching them, Harold felt pride. 3 generations of men in one backyard. He had no idea the picture was already cracking. Vanessa still worked nights, and Darius's hours were unpredictable. One evening, Harold got home early from a site meeting and noticed Vanessa's car still in the driveway. He smiled, thinking she'd gotten the night off. But when he walked inside, she wasn't home. Her phone buzzed on the counter. He reached for it without thinking, meaning only to move it aside. but the preview on the screen froze him in place. "You looked beautiful tonight." His stomach turned. He stared at the phone until the screen went dark. He waited for anger, but what he felt was confusion, disbelief. He told himself maybe it was a friend. He never touched her phone again that night, but he couldn't stop hearing that message in his head. Over the next week, he watched more closely. Vanessa smiled more when she texted. She'd step outside to take calls. Darius avoided eye contact when Harold spoke to him. One afternoon, Harold left work early again. He parked a few houses down and watched. 20 minutes later, Vanessa's car pulled out of the driveway. 10 minutes after that, Darius's truck followed. Same direction. He sat there for a long time, staring through the windshield, the air thick and heavy. When he finally started the engine, his hands trembled on the wheel. He told himself not to jump to conclusions. He told himself he trusted his wife. But as he pulled into his driveway and looked at the photo on the porch wall, the one of all of them smiling under the summer sun, Harold Carter felt something deep inside him shift. Something small but dangerous. The kind of crack you can't see until it's too late. Harold didn't talk much for the next few weeks. He went to work, came home, and moved through the house like a man walking through fog. He wasn't angry yet, just unsettled. Doubt crept in slowly, the kind that wakes you at night and won't let you go back to sleep. At the construction site, his crew noticed the difference. He wasn't as talkative, his smile came slower. One afternoon during a lunch break, his coworker Lionel sat beside him on the back of a pickup truck. "You good, H?" Lionel asked, unwrapping a sandwich. Harold looked up from his coffee. "Yeah, just tired." "Nah," Lionel said, shaking his head. "You look like a man with something on his mind." Harold managed a small grin. "Maybe I am." Lionel had been married twice and divorced twice, so he recognized the signs. "Marriage stuff?" Harold hesitated, then nodded. "I don't know, man. Something just feels off lately. Vanessa's working more nights, taking calls in the other room. Could be nothing." Lionel leaned back against the tailgate. "Could be, but it could also be something. Look, you ever heard of this family safety app? I put it on my wife's phone when I thought she was talking to her old boyfriend. You can see locations, messages, all that." Harold frowned. "That legal?" "Probably not," Lionel said with a laugh. "But it gave me peace of mind. Turns out she wasn't cheating, just helping her sister move. I took it off after that." Harold said nothing for a while. He didn't like the idea of spying on his wife. Still, that feeling in his gut wouldn't leave him. "What's it called?" he asked quietly. "HomeLink," Lionel said. "It's supposed to be a parental control app, but, people use it for other things too." That night, Harold downloaded it. He told himself it was just to make sure Vanessa was safe driving home after long night shifts. He told himself it was protection, not mistrust. He installed it on her phone the next morning, claiming it was something to track Noah's screen time since Vanessa sometimes let him watch cartoons on her phone. She didn't question it. The first few days, nothing happened. He saw her normal routines: home, work, grocery store. No unusual calls, no strange addresses. After a week, Harold felt foolish. He almost deleted the app one night, thinking he'd become paranoid. Then, on a Wednesday evening, while he was watching the news, his phone buzzed. The app sent a notification, synced messages detected. He opened it without thinking. At first, the texts were harmless. "How was your day?" "Just tired." "Miss your cooking." But as the messages scrolled, his breath caught. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive again. Don't forget to delete this." His heart pounded. He read them twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change, hoping he was wrong. But then came the last one. "I'll see you after his shift tomorrow. Same time." Harold sat frozen on the couch, phone trembling in his hand. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was someone from work, a misunderstanding, a wrong number. But the more he read, the clearer it became. Vanessa was having an affair. The woman he loved, the woman he'd defended to everyone, was lying to him. He scrolled to the contact name. No number, just a cloud backup link. The app began syncing again. A few seconds later, a video thumbnail appeared on his screen. Harold hesitated, every nerve in his body screaming not to open it. But he did. The moment it started playing, the sound hit him before the picture did. A low laugh, a familiar voice. Then he saw Vanessa, her hair loose, face flushed, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at him in years. And beside her, Darius. Harold's entire world stopped. The room tilted. His breath came in short, broken gasps. For a long moment, he couldn't move. Then the phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He sat there in silence, the faint sound of the refrigerator humming in the background, the video still playing, faces he loved more than life itself moving in betrayal before his eyes. He shut it off and pressed both hands over his face. "No," he whispered. "No, no." He stayed up all night, staring into the dark, every minute stretching like hours. Around 3 a.m., he stood in Noah's doorway and watched the little boy sleeping, thumb in his mouth, soft curls spread across the pillow. He looked so much like Vanessa. But now, Harold couldn't stop wondering who else he looked like. The next morning, Harold ordered a paternity test kit online. He chose the discreet option, delivered in a plain brown box, results by email. He told himself he wasn't going to use it. He just needed it close, just in case. 2 days later, when the package arrived, he opened it immediately. Vanessa had left her hairbrush on the bathroom counter. He plucked a few strands. From Noah's room, he carefully took a used pacifier. He followed the instructions, labeled everything, sealed the envelope, and mailed it off. Then he waited. Every day that week, Harold functioned like a robot. He went to work, smiled when he had to, came home, played with Noah, kissed Vanessa's forehead goodnight, and lay awake until morning. When the email finally came, he almost didn't open it, but his hands moved on their own. The message was short. Probability of paternity, 0%. He read it 3 times before it sank in. He felt the ground fall away beneath him. The room spun. The sound that came out of him wasn't a cry. It was a low, guttural groan, like something torn from the core of a man. The child he loved, the son he'd raised, wasn't his. His wife had lied to him. His stepson had betrayed him. Harold walked out of the house, down the driveway, and kept walking until the streets blurred. He ended up at a small park by the river, the same place where he'd once taken Vanessa on Sunday afternoons when they first married. He sat on a bench, staring at the water, numb. Around sunset, he drove back home. Vanessa was in the kitchen cooking. "Hey, baby," she said, smiling, stirring a pot of gumbo. "You're quiet tonight." He looked at her face, the face he'd memorized, the one he'd sworn to protect, and felt something die inside him. He wanted to scream. Instead, he walked past her, sat at the table, and said nothing. Later that night, she came upstairs after putting Noah to bed. Harold sat on the edge of their bed, still dressed in his work clothes. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "You've been distant lately." "Yeah," he said. "Just tired." She walked over, rested a hand on his shoulder, and for a second, he wanted to break down and tell her everything, that he knew, that he'd seen the messages, the video, the test. But when she kissed his cheek, something inside him hardened instead. "I love you, Harold," she whispered. "You know that, right?" He forced a smile. "Yeah, I know." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. She turned off the light and went to sleep. Harold sat awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed every memory, their wedding day, the first time she said she loved him, the moment he held Noah for the first time. All of it now twisted, poisoned. In the dark, his heart pounded with a cold, steady rhythm. He knew what she'd done. He knew what Darius had done. But for now, he stayed silent. Because rage that deep doesn't explode, it builds. Harold stopped being himself. Days folded into each other like blank pages, each one quieter than the last. He went to work, gave orders, signed papers, but his voice had no weight. He'd come home, kiss Noah on the forehead, and retreat to the porch with a beer that went warm before he ever finished it. Inside the house, laughter continued without him. Vanessa still smiled, Still cooked, still asked if he was okay, but her tone had started to change, uncertain, searching for a clue she couldn't name. Darius was around less now, often claiming to work late or hang out with friends, though Harold knew from the synced app that he still came by when Vanessa was alone. Every time Harold saw the logs update, his stomach clenched, but he said nothing. It wasn't fear that kept him quiet anymore. It was planning. At work, Lionel noticed. "Man, you look like hell," he said one morning as they stood by a pile of lumber. Harold didn't answer right away. "Just haven't been sleeping." Lionel raised an eyebrow. "That situation with your wife get any better?" Harold stared out across the site, watching dust rise from a bulldozer's path. "No. Worse." "You gonna talk to her?" Lionel asked carefully. "I will," Harold said, his tone flat, his eyes hard. "Soon." He didn't add the rest, that he'd already imagined the conversation 100 times, every version darker than the one before. At home, Vanessa began to notice the distance. Harold had grown quiet and unpredictable. He'd stare at her like he was studying her face for something that wasn't there. When she kissed him goodnight, he barely moved. Once, she reached for his hand at dinner and felt his fingers tighten, not in affection, but restraint. "You're scaring me," she said one evening. "You've barely said a word in days." Harold looked up from his plate, his eyes calm but empty. "Nothing to be scared of," he said. "Just thinking." "About what?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Everything." That night, when Vanessa left for her shift, Harold sat in Noah's room for nearly an hour watching the boy sleep. The small shape under the blanket, the rhythmic breathing, the innocence, it should have softened him, but it didn't. It only twisted deeper. He thought about the paternity report, about the video burned into his mind, about all the nights Vanessa said she was working late. He imagined Darius in his house, his bed, his wife. Each thought scraped against the next until the noise inside his head was unbearable. He began rehearsing the conversation that he knew would come, the one where she'd deny everything, then cry, then beg. But he didn't want apologies anymore. He wanted finality. At work the next day, he found himself zoning out during a safety meeting. The men talked about lumber deliveries and deadlines, but Harold's mind was somewhere else, on the kitchen, on the drawer where he kept his old service pistol. He'd bought it years ago, back when they lived closer to the city. It hadn't been fired since. That night, Vanessa came home to find him sitting in the dark. "Why aren't you asleep?" she asked softly. "I couldn't," he said. "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. She nodded and sat down across from him at the table. "What's going on?" Harold took a slow breath, staring at his hands. "Do you love me?" The question caught her off guard. "Of course I do," she said. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because I need to hear it," he said, his voice low. "I need to know what it means to you." Vanessa frowned, searching his face. "Harold, you're scaring me again. What's wrong?" He met her eyes, and for a split second she saw something she hadn't seen before. Grief and rage fused into one cold stare. "Nothing's wrong," he said finally, standing up. "I just need to clear my head." He left the room before she could answer. The next few days, Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was approaching. Darius noticed it too. One evening, while she sat on the porch, Darius joined her. "He knows," he said quietly. She looked up at him, startled. "What are you talking about?" "Your husband. The way he looks at me. The way he's been acting." "He knows." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He couldn't. He wouldn't." "Ma," Darius interrupted gently, "you think you can hide something like this from a man like him? He's not stupid. He's watching us." Vanessa rubbed her face, fighting tears. "What do we do?" Darius looked toward the street, jaw tight. "We should leave. Tonight." "And go where?" she asked, voice trembling. "You don't even have a job lined up. We'd have nothing." Nothing's better than this, he said, his voice breaking. I can't keep walking around pretending. But Vanessa couldn't bring herself to go. Fear of shame, fear of being exposed, fear of destroying Noah's life, all of it chained her to that house. Just stay quiet, she said finally. Let me talk to him when the time's right. That night, Harold sat in the truck outside the house for nearly an hour after getting home. He didn't even turn off the engine. He thought about driving away, just packing a bag and leaving Montgomery behind, disappearing to some small town where no one knew his name. But that idea only lasted a few seconds. Running wasn't what men like him did. Men like him faced what was in front of them. He took a long breath and turned off the key. The next evening, he came home with a bottle of bourbon. I picked up something for us, he said casually. Vanessa blinked, surprised. You drink maybe twice a year. Yeah, he said, pouring 2 glasses. But I thought we could talk, like we used to. She hesitated, then nodded. Darius was supposed to be out late that night. The house was quiet, Noah asleep upstairs. They sat at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. You've been distant, she said carefully. I know, Harold replied. I've had a lot on my mind. Is it work? No, he said, looking at her. It's us. She set her glass down. Harold, I know, he interrupted, his voice steady. Don't lie. Not tonight. Her lips parted, but no words came out. His stare pinned her where she sat. How long? He asked quietly. How long has it been going on? Her eyes filled instantly. Please, Harold. How long? He repeated, louder now, though his tone stayed even. A year? She shook her head. Longer? He leaned forward. Tell me the truth. Her face crumpled. It was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen. With Darius, he said, not asking, stating. Vanessa's whole body seemed to fold in on itself. Please, you don't understand. I understand enough, he said. You slept with my stepson. You gave me a son that isn't mine. She covered her mouth, sobbing. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to? His voice cracked, raw and hoarse. You lied to me every day for 2 years, raised that boy in my house, and smiled in my face. I'm sorry, she whispered. Please, Harold, I'll fix it. I'll tell the truth. We can. He stood up so fast the chair tipped. His fists clenched, his breathing rough. Fix it? There's no fixing this. She reached for him. Don't do this. He stepped back, eyes burning. I already did. Upstairs, Noah stirred and whimpered, but neither of them moved. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows like a whisper. Harold stared at his wife for a long time, then turned away. Go to bed, he said softly. We'll talk in the morning. But there would be no morning, not the way she imagined. When he lay down that night beside her, his mind was quiet, frighteningly clear. He could see every mistake, every lie, every face in perfect detail. And beneath all that, a voice spoke in his chest like a slow drum. End it. It rained that night, the kind of steady southern rain that softened the air and drowned the sound of everything else. The house was quiet except for the rhythm of it hitting the windows. Vanessa lay in bed, turned away from Harold, eyes open in the dark. She could feel the tension beside her, the stillness that wasn't sleep. Harold stared at the ceiling, every muscle in his body tight. He had replayed the same thoughts for days, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. Somewhere in the middle of it all, something inside him snapped. He got up quietly and walked to the kitchen. The bourbon bottle from the night before still sat half empty on the counter. He poured a small glass and swallowed it in one go. Then he reached under the sink where the old lockbox sat. Inside was his pistol. He hadn't touched it in years. He carried it back to the bedroom and set it on the dresser, his hand trembling only once. When Vanessa stirred, he sat down on the edge of the bed. Wake up, he said softly. She rolled over, confused. What's wrong? We're going to talk. Her voice cracked. Harold, please, not again. I can't. You're going to talk, he interrupted, calm but cold. You're going to tell me everything. She sat up slowly, clutching the blanket to her chest. Please don't do this. You did this, he said. You brought this here, into our house, into our bed. I'm sorry, she cried. You have to believe me, I didn't plan it. Don't say you didn't mean it, he snapped. You meant every word, every lie, every time you looked at me and called me husband. She tried to reach for him, but he pulled away. I can't fix what happened, she whispered. But I'll leave. I'll take Noah and go. You'll never see me again. Harold shook his head. You're not taking him. He's my son, she said desperately. Our son, he corrected softly, though both of them knew the word wasn't true. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, both breathing hard. Then she noticed the pistol on the dresser. Her breath caught. Harold, she said, her voice breaking. Please, no. He turned, picked it up, held it low by his side. You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you unless you lie to me again. Tears streamed down her face. Please. How long? He asked again. Since before Noah, she whispered. I wanted to stop. I tried to, but it was too late. Too late? He repeated, his voice rising for the first time. Too late for what? For him to be mine? She flinched at the sound. It wasn't supposed to happen. You said that already. He took a slow step toward her. I gave you everything. I trusted you. And you gave me this. She shook her head, sobbing. I loved you, Harold. You loved what I gave you, he said. This house, this life. You used me to cover your sin. That's not true. He stared at her for a long time, then lowered his gaze. It's all right, he said quietly. You can rest now. She realized what he meant a second before he moved. She screamed and lunged for the gun. It went off once, a deafening crack that shook the walls. Her body jerked back, the sound of it colliding with the dresser. For a moment, Harold stood frozen, the gun still raised, smoke curling in the dim light. Vanessa slid to the floor, one hand pressed against her chest, the other reaching for him. Please, she whispered. He dropped to his knees beside her, but it was too late. Her eyes fluttered once, then went still. He sat there in silence, the rain outside steady and endless. He didn't cry. He just stared at her face, pale in the half-light, and whispered, I loved you. He didn't hear the door open downstairs. Darius's truck had pulled in moments before. He had seen the lights on and come in quietly, thinking Vanessa was still awake. When he reached the top of the stairs, he heard the shot. Mom? He shouted, running down the hall. He froze in the doorway when he saw her on the floor, blood pooling around her hand. What did you do? He screamed. Harold looked up slowly, eyes glassy. She lied to me. Darius's chest heaved. You killed her. He lunged, tackling Harold to the floor. The gun slid under the bed. They struggled, fists flying, grunts echoing through the small room. Harold's rage boiled over. He swung wildly, his strength overpowering Darius's youth. They crashed against the dresser, sending photos tumbling. One frame shattered, the family portrait. Glass scattered across the floor, slicing into Darius's arm. He barely felt it. He grabbed Harold by the collar. You ruined everything, he shouted. You ruined me, Harold growled. They fought until both were gasping, faces slick with sweat and blood. Darius tried to crawl toward the gun. Harold saw it first. They reached it at the same time. A second shot went off. The room fell silent except for Harold's ragged breathing. He looked down at Darius, motionless on the floor, blood seeping into the carpet. The smell of gunpowder and iron filled the air. Harold staggered back, staring at what he'd done. His wife, his stepson, gone. He sank into the corner, gun still in his hand, and whispered to himself, It's over. It's finally over. But the quiet didn't last. Noah began to cry from his room down the hall, a high, innocent wail that sliced through the silence. Harold dropped the gun, hands shaking. He walked to Noah's room, lifted the boy from his crib, and held him close, rocking him gently. "Shh," he murmured. "It's okay, buddy. Daddy's here." The words came out broken. He stood there for a long time, the child's sobs slowing, his own breath uneven. When he finally put Noah back down, he walked back into the hallway. The rain had stopped. The house smelled of gun smoke and sorrow. He knew what he had to do next. Downstairs, he opened drawers, scattering papers and knocking over a lamp. He pulled the back door open halfway and kicked it off its latch. He grabbed a jewelry box from the dresser and tossed it into the backyard mud. He smeared blood on the window frame, his mind working mechanically now. A robbery. That's what it had to look like. He checked the clock. It was after 3 a.m. He dialed 911, voice trembling but rehearsed. "Help," he gasped. Someone broke in. "My wife and my stepson. Please, send help." The dispatcher tried to keep him calm as sirens wailed in the distance. When the paramedics and officers arrived, they found Harold sitting on the front steps, face pale, hands shaking. "They're dead," he said hoarsely. "They're both dead." The police moved inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. One of the paramedics bent down beside Vanessa. "No pulse," she said quietly. Another checked Darius and shook his head. Harold buried his face in his hands. "I don't understand," he said between sobs. "I heard something, came running. God, what happened?" The scene looked convincing enough at first glance. The back door was damaged, drawers pulled open, jewelry missing. But Detective Sarah McMillan wasn't convinced. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, experienced. She'd seen too many staged crime scenes to mistake this one for real. "The door's kicked from the inside," she murmured to the officer beside her. "And the jewelry box? Too clean. Whoever did this was in a hurry or trying too hard." The officer nodded. "You think it's the husband?" McMillan glanced toward Harold, still sitting outside under a blanket, head in his hands. "I think we need to look closer," she said. By sunrise, the bodies had been taken to the coroner's office. The house was sealed off with yellow tape. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalks, whispering, clutching coffee cups. "The Carters," one woman said, shocked. "But they were such a nice family." Harold gave his statement at the station, his voice calm but unsteady. "I came home late, found the door open. I called out. Nobody answered. Then I saw them." Detective McMillan studied him across the table. "You didn't hear the gunshots?" "No," Harold said. "I was outside. Maybe I scared them off." "Did you notice anything missing?" "A few things. Jewelry, maybe cash. Anyone have problems with your family recently?" "No," he said quietly. "We keep to ourselves." She nodded, jotting notes. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Carter." When he left the station, his face was the picture of grief. But behind his eyes, something colder had settled. He had gotten away with it, for now. Back at the house, McMillan walked through the rooms again. She stopped in the bedroom doorway, eyes narrowing. "Look at this," she said to the forensic tech. 2 entry wounds, 2 bodies, no sign of forced restraint. The pattern's too clean. The tech nodded. "Could be domestic." "Yeah," McMillan said softly. "Could be." She looked around the room one more time, her gaze landing on the family photos shattered on the floor, glass speckled with dried blood. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hand. In the picture, they were all smiling. Harold, Vanessa, Darius, and a small boy with dimples. McMillan exhaled slowly. "Families," she muttered. "They hide everything until it explodes." Detective Sarah McMillan spent the next morning combing through the Carter case file at her desk. Something about it kept her from closing it as just another domestic gone wrong. The scene had looked too neat, the husband's story too polished. She had seen grief before, real grief, Harold Carter's eyes hadn't looked like grief. They'd looked like control. Macmillan was methodical. She started with the basics: call logs, phone records, digital data recovery from Vanessa's phone. The department's tech specialist, Officer Ramsey, brought her the first piece of good news. "Ma'am, I found something odd on Mrs. Carter's phone," he said, setting a tablet in front of her. "There's an app here that doesn't match the rest of her usage pattern. Hidden folder tied to a cloud backup." "Show me." Ramsey opened the folder. A list of synced text messages scrolled across the screen, romantic, explicit, time-stamped. Macmillan's brow furrowed. "Who's the other party?" Ramsey checked the number. "It's registered to a Darius Hunter, her son." Macmillan leaned back slowly, absorbing the implication. Her son. Technically stepson, Ramsey corrected. She had him before she married Mr. Carter. Macmillan exhaled. "Okay, that changes things." She picked up the phone and called her sergeant. "I think we've got a motive." That same day, Harold showed up at the construction site, trying to look composed. Lionel approached him cautiously. "Man, I saw the news," he said quietly. "I don't even know what to say." Harold nodded, eyes tired. "Appreciated." "They find who did it?" "Not yet. Detectives said they're working leads." Lionel hesitated. You told them about that app? The one I mentioned?" Harold froze mid-sip of his coffee. "What app? That Homelink thing?" "You said you put it on your wife's phone, right?" Harold's expression didn't change, but a small chill went down his back. "No," he said after a moment. "Didn't end up doing that." Lionel shrugged. "All right. Just thought maybe it could help them trace something." The moment Lionel walked away, Harold's hands began to tremble. If the police dug deep enough, they'd find the app logs. And once they did, everything would unravel. That afternoon, Macmillan and her team returned to the Carter house with a search warrant. They collected laptops, tablets, and Harold's phone. When she scrolled through his browser history, Macmillan noticed the online purchase receipt for a DNA paternity kit. The order date, 2 weeks before the murders. "There it is," she muttered. He found out. Back at the station, the lab confirmed what she already suspected. Gunshot residue on Harold's hands. His fingerprints on the weapon that had been wiped clean but not well enough. Blood spatter on the inside cuff of his work jeans. Macmillan looked over the evidence table and shook her head. He thought he was smarter than this. Meanwhile, Harold sat in his truck in the parking lot, staring at his reflection in the windshield. The news had already started running segments about the tragedy, the respected foreman who lost his family in a supposed robbery. People dropped off flowers at the fence, neighbors spoke kindly of him. He should have felt something, but all he felt was exhaustion, an empty ache in his chest that no amount of bourbon could drown. That night, Macmillan came knocking. Harold opened the door, trying to mask the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Evening, Mr. Carter," she said politely. "Mind if we talk?" "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "You found anything yet?" "A few things," she replied, sitting down at the table. "I wanted to clear some details. You mentioned a robbery. Can you tell me again what you saw when you came in?" Harold recited his story word for word. The door, the broken drawer, the blood, the panic. Macmillan nodded along, then leaned back. "Strange thing, though," she said, almost conversational. "For a robbery, there was no sign of forced entry. Door was kicked from the inside." Harold's throat tightened. Maybe they used a key. Vanessa sometimes left one under the mat. "We checked. It's still there." She watched him carefully. "You mentioned you were outside when it happened?" "That's right. Neighbors didn't see your truck leave or return that night. They must not have been looking." "Maybe not." She smiled faintly. "Tell me something, Mr. Carter. Were you aware that your wife's phone was syncing messages to a hidden folder?" He blinked. "What?" "You installed a monitoring app. We found it. Same one linked to your phone." His mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," she said gently. "We also found a receipt for a paternity test you ordered. The results were opened a week before your wife died. You found out Noah wasn't yours, didn't you?" Harold's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Macmillan folded her hands. You're not the first man to be pushed past his breaking point, but you have a choice now. Keep lying and let a jury decide, or tell me the truth. The silence stretched long enough to hear the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Harold whispered, "You don't understand." "Then help me," she said. "Make me understand." His eyes filled, not with tears, but with fury and shame. "She made a fool out of me," he said, voice trembling. "In my own house. My wife and that boy, her boy." He slammed a hand on the table, the sound sharp. "I gave them everything. Everything." "And you killed them," Macmillan said quietly. Harold's breath hitched. "I didn't mean to. It just happened." "You shot them both," she said. "Then you tried to make it look like a robbery." "I panicked," he said, voice cracking. "I couldn't think. I just knew it was over." Macmillan nodded slowly, her tone calm. "I believe you panicked, but that doesn't change what happened." She stood, gestured toward the doorway. "Harold Carter, you're under arrest for the murders of Vanessa and Darius Carter." When the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he didn't resist. He just stared at the floor as officers led him out. Word spread quickly. Montgomery was small enough that everyone knew the story by the next morning. "He killed them?" people whispered at the diner. "All that time, we thought it was a break-in." Some said they understood. Some said there was no excuse. Vanessa's co-workers at St. Mary's held a vigil in the hospital courtyard. Lionel watched the news from his couch, shaking his head. "Damn," he whispered. "I told him to use that app, but not like this." The court ordered Noah placed with Vanessa's aunt, who lived 2 towns over. The little boy didn't understand why people whispered when he asked for mommy. Macmillan stayed late at her desk that night, finishing the report. Her partner asked, "Why do you always look so heavy after a case?" She closed the folder. "Because there's never really a win in these," she said. "Just the truth, and the truth never fixes what's broken." The courtroom was packed the day Harold's trial began. Reporters lined the hallway, microphones ready, the story already burning through Montgomery. Inside, the air felt heavy. Harold sat at the defense table in a gray suit, thinner now, older somehow, his hands clasped tight. He looked nothing like the proud foreman people once knew. The prosecutor opened with quiet precision, painting a picture of betrayal, rage, and control. "This was not a random crime," she said. "It was a man who discovered the truth and chose blood over forgiveness." The defense countered with a plea of emotional breakdown, arguing that Harold had acted under temporary insanity, that he'd snapped after unbearable humiliation. But the evidence was unshakable. The texts, the video, the DNA results, the co-worker's testimony, the gun residue, all lined up like pieces of a puzzle that fit too perfectly. Macmillan sat near the back of the courtroom, her face unreadable as each photo was projected onto the screen. The kitchen table, the broken door, the bodies, the shattered family portrait. Harold's lawyer tried to humanize him, calling character witnesses who spoke about his kindness, his years of hard work, his devotion as a father. The jury listened, but their eyes told the truth. They saw guilt wrapped in regret. When Harold took the stand, his voice was low, cracked from sleepless nights. "I didn't plan to hurt them," he said. "I just wanted her to tell me the truth. But when I saw her face, when I heard her admit it, something in me broke. I couldn't stop. I wish to God I could." Vanessa's sister wept in the gallery. Lionel stared at the floor, unable to look at him. When the closing arguments ended, the courtroom fell into stillness. The jury went out just before sunset and returned less than 3 hours later. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree on both counts." The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Harold didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the floor, as though he'd already known the verdict before they said it. The sentence came a week later, life in prison without parole. In the small crowd outside, some said justice was done. Others said it was just another tragedy with no real winners. Detective McMillan stood by the courthouse steps afterward, speaking quietly to a local reporter. "People think secrets keep families safe," she said. "But secrets rot from the inside out. They always find their way to the light." Months later, the Carter house was sold. New paint covered the walls. New furniture filled the rooms, but the neighborhood still felt its shadow. Vanessa's co-workers still spoke of her in the break room, remembering her laugh, the way she used to hum while making coffee. Darius's friends left flowers near the fence post where the police tape once fluttered. Noah, too young to remember the night that changed everything, grew up in his aunt's home. When people asked about his parents, she told him they loved him in their own broken way. Time passed, but the story stayed, a reminder of how love can twist into something unrecognizable when pride and pain take over. And somewhere behind prison walls, Harold still thought of the life he destroyed with his own hands, playing it over and over like a punishment that never ended. Secrets, betrayal, family, pride, those things built the world he lost. Some say justice was served, others say everyone lost. But one truth remained. Once trust dies, everything that grows from it carries the taste of its ashes. If you followed this story till the end, tell us what you think in the comments. Was Harold a man pushed too far, or was he always capable of darkness? Let us know your thoughts below. Kindly subscribe to our channel for more true life stories like this one. Tell us where you're watching from, and we'll see you in the next episode.